Welcome to this week's Global Quickie. I'm Michael Brooks. Every week on the Global Quickie, we pick an event from the world, something from politics, something from culture, something from international relations, explain to you why it matters, and give you a little bit of context and history behind it. On this week's Global Quickie, more evidence that George W. Bush and Tony Blair were lying about WMDs in Iraq. Now, this matters. This might be old news for some people, and most everybody knows that Tony Blair and George W. Bush hyped the case for the invasion of Iraq. It matters because today we're living with the fallout of that catastrophic decision to mount the invasion of Iraq. And new evidence just came out of South Africa of how duplicitous Bush and Blair were in their push for the invasion. In a new book called God, Spies and Lies, a South African journalist exposes how former South African President Thabo Mbeki and Nelson Mandela, the first president of post-apartheid South Africa, both tried to stop Bush and Blair from invading Iraq. And Thabo Mbeki did this in a very interesting way. This is South Africa's president at the time of the invasion. He was friends and enjoyed good relations with both Tony Blair and Saddam Hussein and cordial relations with George W. Bush. And what he did, according to this new book, was reconstitute an old team of scientists who worked on the apartheid government's WMD program. This was a program in the 1980s instituted by the apartheid government to develop their own WMD capacities, and they worked on these programs with Saddam Hussein's Ba'athist regime in Iraq. So they knew the lay of the land of Iraq. They knew how these programs worked. Saddam Hussein gave Thabo Mbeki and his government permission to send this team into Iraq and verify for themselves that Iraq's WMD program was dormant, was done, was finished, all the things that we know after that invasion. The team went in, they roamed freely, and armed with that information, Thabo Mbeki attempted to dissuade Tony Blair and George W. Bush from invading Iraq. Of course, that got nowhere. Nelson Mandela, the world-renowned icon of democratic and freedom struggles, called up George W. Bush himself to talk about how disastrous the invasion would be. George W. Bush ignored his phone call and sent him off to Condoleezza Rice. In fact, George W. Bush didn't take Nelson Mandela's phone call until George W. Bush's father told him he should probably take the Nobel Peace Prize winner and international hero's call. Of course, it was all to no avail. They invaded Iraq, and we live with the consequences every day, and they should live with some consequences in the future. I'm Michael Brooks, and that's this week's Global Quickie.